Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clark Duncan, and I serve as Executive Director for the Economic Development Coalition for Asheville and Buncombe County, and really excited to serve on the NCEDA Board of Directors. I'm also excited to be your MC today for the EDPNC Real Estate Report webinar, and great to see all of you here with us. Before starting the program, of course, we'd like to acknowledge NCEDA's valuable annual sponsors whose logos you should see on the screen now. These are the companies and organizations and partners that support every component of NCEDA's expansive mission and our growing body of programs. We thank all of these sponsors for their generous support, like webinars that benefit our membership, and especially like the one we're about to share today. Today, we are going to be delving into the realm of real estate development and its significance for communities and business and economic development across our state. Today's presentation will equip you with the insights and resources needed to navigate this landscape effectively. During this webinar, we're going to explore the importance of understanding real estate trends and opportunities and how they impact your community. We'll provide practical guidance on leveraging state-level data to make informed decisions and capitalize on emerging opportunities. Now, I'd like to introduce a good friend to many of us here on the call, our speaker, Garrett Wyckoff. As the Product Development Manager for the EDPNC, Garrett is the driving force behind this webinar. With a remarkable history of successfully overseeing a multitude of economic development projects, leading to substantial growth in capital investment, Garrett brings valuable insights into North Carolina's real estate market. His understanding of the state's real estate landscape and its impact on business strategies make him an excellent resource for the discussion today. We're delighted to have him join us to delve deeper in how the EDPNC can serve as a valuable resource to all of you. So without further ado, I'll hand off to Garrett. Garrett, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Clark. Really appreciate that. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Really looking forward to having this opportunity to share the information that we've collected from this 2024 real estate report with all of our economic development practitioners across the state. Before we get started, I do want to kind of call out a couple of quick shout outs. First, I want to thank Liz and her team, as well as the 2025 NCEDA leadership and sponsors for hosting our discussion today and providing this platform in which to do so. Secondly, special thanks to this year's real estate report sponsor, the North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives. The electric cooperatives continue to be a wonderful partner and sponsor to the EDPNC as we regularly collaborate on specific economic development initiatives throughout the entire state that we believe will continue to move the needle forward for the communities and residents of the Old North State. As part of our presenting group today, we have Anna Walker, who was the Economic Development Manager with the Electric Cooperatives. And Anna, I wanted to give you an opportunity to offer any words before we dive into the exciting data.
Thanks, Garrett. I'll keep it quick. I know we're all excited for the data and the meat of the presentation, but just want to say good afternoon and happy Thursday to everyone. As Garrett so kindly introduced, I am Anna Walker, the Economic Development Manager for North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives, and we're thrilled to sponsor today's webinar and the EDPNC's Real Estate Report. As you'll hear about from Lena and Garrett throughout this presentation, and as you've probably already noticed in your own work and communities, high-impact, transformative projects are continuing to push further into rural and suburban areas across both the country and our state. Our 26 electric cooperatives are increasing resources and support of economic development projects through grants for site identification and development, through technical assistance for state, federal, and foundation grant programs, and through 0% interest loans for infrastructure, buildings, and community development projects. Our co-ops serve portions of 93 of the 100 counties in the state. So if you don't know which cooperative serves your area, Or if you want to learn anything else about our program supporting economic development, please give me a call and we can get you all set up. North Carolina's electric cooperatives are here to support the prosperity of your communities, and we look forward to continue working with our partners, all of you, and with the illustrious EDPNC. I'll hand it back to the incomparable Garrett Wyckoff and Lena Hobbs-Brown for the main show and what we're all here for.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, with that, let's get started. I would like to introduce my colleague, Lena Hobbs-Brown, who in all honesty did the yeoman's work, the majority of the work on this year's report. So I thank her for that. She's going to kick things off for us and then hand it back to me to kind of finish off the back half of the presentation. And then we'll kind of dive into some key real estate, key trends that we're seeing. And then, as Liz noted, open it up for questions. So with that, Lena, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Garrett. And thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Lena Hobbs-Brown. I'm the business recruitment and existing industry specialist here at EDPNC. And like Garrett said, I was just one of the people who helped put this report together. So happy to dive into the first couple slides here. This first slide you'll see is just a general overview of our entire project pipeline, including both business recruitment and existing industry. As in past years, you'll see that manufacturing and assembly is the majority of our projects, making up 79% of our pipeline. On the second slide here, you will see a breakout of on-site expansion projects versus new location projects. For the majority of the data and the rest of this report, we'll be focusing on those new location projects. And so that is 326 out of the 429 projects that both our business recruitment team and our existing industry teams worked in 2024. Here you'll see a breakout of just the activity of those new location projects, those 326 new location projects. Again, you'll see manufacturing and assembly makes up the majority of that breakout, with warehouse and service and sales following behind. Here on this slide, you'll see a more specific breakout of the project scope of these activities. So you'll see that with manufacturing and assembly, we had 251 projects, and then you'll see that outline of jobs, investment, and wages as well, and that same information for the rest of our primary activities. As far as project sources go for 2024, as in previous years, the site selection consultants, as well as EDPNC leads and internal referrals, those make up the majority of our pipeline. Those two main sources kind of flip-flop back and forth between which one is the number one source of projects. That being said, I will say in 2024, we did see an uptick of leads coming from local counties and developers. So that was cool to see definitely in 2024. In this slide, you'll see our industry sectors for those 326 new location projects. This is pretty similar to previous years. You'll see energy, food, beverage, and agriculture, chemicals, plastics, and rubber, automotive, and biotech and life sciences were our top industries. This is pretty in line with previous years. I will say that biotech and life science did replace construction materials compared to 2024 and 2023. And then again, similarly, you'll see the breakout of the scope of those projects within these industry sectors. So you'll see that with aerospace and aviation, automotive, all these different industry sectors, the breakout of those projects, you'll see energy tends to be the largest scope of projects we see, with 336 median jobs and the investment being $119 million. And then I think, yep, for the next slide, I'll let Garrett take over to begin talking about some of those more specific real estate requests.
Yeah, thanks, Lena. So yeah, for the next couple of slides, you're going to see we kind of focused on providing a little bit more detail around those top two industry sectors, energy on this slide, and then we'll get to food and bev. But just a little bit of and obviously on the scope, I don't think of projects. These two are probably pretty far apart. So there's not really a whole lot to glean from like a comparison, so to speak, but you can just see here, of the 45 projects that the team worked in 24, 29 of those, about 65% had a real estate request associated with that. Looking for a building only, while percentage wise, it's significantly, I guess I would say significantly higher than a site only request, a build to suit request. When you look at the projects, it's, four more, we're looking for a building. What I will say here, like what we've noticed with these energy projects is they just have big requirements all the way around. Looking at the average square footage of that request, you can see there over 300,000 square feet. Ceiling height is about, average, but, large power, huge power needs. And then, water and wastewater, fairly large, but, not anything out of the ordinary. So that's kind of what we're seeing from this breakdown. I will say what's interesting, and we'll get to some slides specifically about, rail and port access, at least with these two industry sectors, a rail need or requirement, or asking or rail being preferred, seem to be higher than, and we'll show this data, higher than with, other projects. Okay, Lena. All right, and then food and beverage, kind of as Lena has stated, food and bev in agriculture, it is North Carolina's #1 industrial sector. It always remains, or has been consistently in that top 1, 2, 3 over the years we've been doing this report, and this year is no different. But you can see here with the scope of, the food and beverage project, again, another 45 of these specifically worked. 25 of those had a real estate request or required assistance from our team. Again, building only versus a site only request. Percentage wise, pretty big gap, but when you look at the numbers, slightly more, we're looking for only a building request. Utility requirements, much less than we see with energy, on average about 8 megawatt requirement, and much less daily water and sewer demands. Again, highlighting the rail need, you can see, 8 of these projects either required rail or said it was preferred. So again, I think, what you may glean from here is that, if the food and bev industry is one that your particular county has highlighted, and you're looking to potentially develop new product or build a shell building, getting it close, if you have rail, making sure it's close to that, or has the ability to access rail, could put you in a better competitive position for this type of project. Okay, Lena. Just in general, looking at when we look at our industry sectors and then take that down to a subsector level, the clean energy sector and that subsector, and that makes up, you can see a lot of the different type of projects that by industry that may fall in there. But you can see that, we had a large number 60 projects were designated as clean energy opportunities in 2024. And I think what's interesting is that 95% or 57 of those were for manufacturing operations. So, which I guess, for most of us that have lived and worked in North Carolina for a long time, manufacturing is our bread and butter. It's what we're really known for. I think life science is a great example. Maybe a lot of the R&D is done, in the Boston, Cambridge, San Francisco, but when they want to actually produce the drug or what they're doing, they look toward North Carolina for those opportunities. I think another thing that, just to kind of give everybody by industry within that subsector, again, energy and automotive kind of dominate the industry sectors within this subsector. And again, I think we wanted to show kind of the median jobs, investment, wages, for these type of operations. Again, if this is an industry sector that your community has identified that you'd like to go after, I mean, obviously workforce and a number of other things are important, but the ROI back to the community can be quite significant. You see the median jobs there, 370 to 400, excellent median investment, high wage jobs. So these are, these can be great opportunities for obviously both the state and local communities. So let's get into some of the kind of more granular items. So information around our foreign direct investment efforts. So in 2024, we had 326 projects created, largely driven by our business development team and our international offices. We consider any project where the parent company is international. That's what makes up this data. Compared to 2023, we did have a decrease from 48% of international projects being created to 42% in 2024. So I think this reflects the commitment that in recent years that the EDPNC has made to that BD team to really be that tip of the spear, be at trade shows, be boots on the ground in Europe, Asia, Japan, Canada now, to really bring opportunities to North Carolina. You can see here, so not a whole lot of change, compared to past years in the top countries that have brought FDI opportunities to North Carolina. Couple of things that I will highlight here is that I believe this is the first time that at least in 2024, that we saw Canada kind of leading the way with 13% of the opportunities coming from there. I think another thing of interest to note is China. Whether even through the Biden administration, tensions have remained high between the U.S. and China. Even in the first part of 2024, and then I think with some of the other data we're going to show you, then you've got some of the tariff stuff with the new administration out of DC coming online, but China remains a strong partner, maybe not partner, strong creator of opportunities for North Carolina. The other thing that I kind of took away from this slide was Japan. Typically we've always kind of been known as having a great partnership with the Japanese and Japanese projects. To see it down in 24 to 11th, at least on this list, is quite low. And then again, I would say it's not lost on me though that really the efforts of the BD team. We have a concerted effort with Nathaniel in China, in Asia. We have our team in the UK or in Europe that works a lot of the Germany, Italian, UK projects and brings those. So this really, to me, just kind of shows where we actually have offices. That's where a lot of our projects are, foreign projects are coming from. Nathaniel was kind of doing double duty with Asia and Canada, and now we have BD has a new team member that's focused on North America and specifically Canada. So I think we'll continue to see high numbers there, but that's really the first concerted effort internally that the EDPNC has made to kind of make inroads in Canada, and we're starting to see the fruits of that labor paying off. All right, so let's talk about the real estate. I know that this is really the things, the items in the report that can help craft, future decisions around developing, product, whether that's a shell building or a site. So just kind of the 30,000 foot view of all the projects created in 2024, about 62% of those had a EDPNC assisted in a company in their real estate search. Of those 201 projects, 84% of those were in manufacturing. So again, nothing that's lost on us, but again, we still continue to be a strong manufacturing state where companies want to at least explore opportunities here. So building versus site. So, of those that I just mentioned, of those 168 real estate requests, strictly for the manufacturing projects now, when we do a deeper dive, you can see here this pie chart shows projects that were only looking for a building. So 80 of those, are about half, 48%. Those only looking for a site, 27%. And then building or site at 25%. It's kind of interesting when you look at the 22 and 23 data that this is almost kind of, the shaded areas have almost kind of flipped. Back in 22, it was 49% were looking for a site only. And then we saw that drop off in 23 at 37% and now down to 27%. The one thing I would note, I would say, the flexibility that I think companies have, and whether it's going to be a building or a site, those percentages seem to be fairly consistent at about 20 to 25% of the projects that we assist on real estate requests with. All right, so diving down into the buildings. Square footage, what did our requests look like for that? So I think that what you're going to see is, and noted on in a slide that's upcoming, is that a lot of those requests for a large building footprint are pretty minimal. Anything 500,000 and above, it's about 8% of the project activity. That sweet spot tends to be, I kind of, when I see when we dive into the 20,000 to 50,000 square foot range, which is the highest request percentage, most of those are probably closer, are in that 40 to 50,000 square foot range. So if you kind of look at 50,000 to 200,000, that that makes up some like 60% of the square footage requests. So I think, understanding that, building, if you had to do specifically a shell building, if you were looking to, like, what should that footprint look like? I think, anything in that 50 to 75, even 100,000 square foot range to start with, it with the ability for the building to be, flipped or doubled in size, kind of gives you, a pretty good, allows you to capture, a pretty good amount of the requests that are coming to us. Around ceiling height. This one was when I kind of looked at the data on this one, it's really hard to really get a good hold on, if someone wanted to pinpoint down, like, what should a ceiling height, look like, or whatnot, if you were going to maybe do a shell building. What I kind of, going back to my commerce days, it felt like there was a period of time there where every RFI that came in, like, minimum, it needed 32-foot clear ceiling height. We are seeing less and less of that, and I think this year's data also shows that. So again, it seems like the ranges of need are kind of spread out all over the place. But again, I think if someone, if you were to focus in that, minimum 24 to 30 clear, you're capturing about 45% of not necessarily market share, but opportunities out there that are looking. Acreage requests. This is kind of the slide I was alluding to around larger projects. I mean, you can see here that in 2024, we only had two projects, 2%, that were looking for, 500 acres plus land. Again, these percentages are, kind of all over the place. But again, anything from that 20 to 100 square foot range, captures about 55% of the request. So that's kind of that remains, and pretty fairly consistently, that remains the sweet spot of acreage need when we get RFIs. So buy versus lease, what does that look like? So again, these numbers seem to be fairly consistent. I think everybody, most economic development practitioners, you see this on a fairly regular basis. Lease requests or buy or lease tend to outweigh a company coming in and wanting to outright, buy a building or even a site, which is, pretty much aligns with what a lot of developers and the folks on that side of the real estate equation are looking to accomplish. So nothing really groundbreaking, with this slide, just kind of continues to show the consistency that that a lease, or considering, a buy or lease option is the larger percentages that lie there. So when we break sorry, y'all, I thought I had a different slide in there, but we'll look at natural gas there and the need for that, or what we saw the need for. So if someone is looking, and this is only for building request only, if they're looking for a building, the requirement for natural gas is slightly higher, 3 percentage points more than no. But when you add in the preferred piece of that, then you're looking at about 60%, of the requests are requiring natural gas when considering a building. This number jumps up, considerably versus a site or a build-to-suit option when they want to consider natural gas. You're looking at closer to 75% of those type of requests either require or it would be preferred if that site had natural gas on it, or available, I guess I should say. Again, kind of breaking down building requests versus rail, or a site request with rail. You can see here that from a building standpoint, 12%. So, and I guess if you put in preferred there, you're looking at about 19% of the projects would like to have rail access. Again, this number jumps up a little bit when you're looking at if you're looking to develop a site in its proximity to rail, and kind of focusing on having a rail site in your community. So yeah, I think when we go through some key trends, the thing I would say about this, and maybe even the jumping ahead, I think the port slide is next, is that I think you also have to take into context, like if you just look at these numbers in a vacuum and say, oh, well, 81% of projects don't need rail, and in this case, looking at port, they're not requiring port service, whether it is a building, or a site. I mean, I think we have to take into context that, not every project needs, so the ones that do, they need it. If they don't, it's not a big factor, for them. But when you just look at the numbers at first glance, both rail and port are not a huge requirement, at least in the projects that we saw in 2024. Site certification interest, and again, I feel like I'm a broken record here. I hate to say it first blush again, but as I've been a member of the North Carolina Certified Sites Committee for more years than I'd like to count. At first blush, when I look at these numbers, it's a little bit disappointing. But again, when you think about it, whether you're certified, or not, what we have seen from site consultants companies, they are asking for that same level of due diligence, whether you package that due diligence and work through the North Carolina Certified Site Program or the Duke program, or, NC Rails, the different programs. The EMC has a site readiness program. So, they're still going to require that, phase 1, phase 2, wetlands determination. All those things are maybe not required, but they're going to want to see that some of that is done. It's all about the timing, and the less that they have to spend on waiting for permitting and all that due diligence work to be done, the quicker that they can be building and start manufacturing their project or their product. So I think the other thing that needs to be considered here as well is that site certification looks very different in virtually every state that we compete with. So while it may not be a huge consideration when we get an RFI from a site consultant, really what we hear back from the site consultant community is that, well, what North Carolina requires as a certified site is not the same as what South Carolina or Georgia or any of our other major competitors. So as long as there's not like one entity that that everybody is working towards to meet those goals, I think at least with site consultants, they're a little bit skeptical of what does that actually mean for your state when you say it's site certified. But again, they tend to ask for all of that documentation anyway. So I wouldn't want anybody to look at this slide and say, oh, well, site certification isn't all that, or a readiness program is not all that important, because ultimately it's it's going to be, because they're going to want to see that due diligence, while they evaluate various sites for their project. And then we wanted to highlight, because it has been we saw a tremendous shift in project scope and size for probably, I would say, the last at least 2.5, 3 years, maybe 4 years, once things got semi back to normal after COVID. But looking at $1 billion plus manufacturing projects, what are we seeing as a state from these large projects? So you can see here in 2024, we assisted with 14 manufacturing projects that exceeded $1 billion in capital investment. This is a 30% decrease from the projects of this size that we assisted in 2023. Again, automotive, motor vehicles, and energy kind of lead the way, for these larger projects. So I think, it appears at least that maybe 2024 is the start of a trend getting away from seeing, what seemed to be there for a few years, where every time we turned around, we were, getting another 1,000 job, $1 billion opportunity. That has dropped off quite a bit in 2024. And then before we get to some key trends, I think this is the last slide in our deck, but wanted to give, continue to highlight why we lose projects when we get feedback from a consultant or a company on why they may have, ultimately chose a different location in a different state. So as in previous years, the majority of our projects, the reason why we lose them is due to a lack of suitable real estate options. This trend continues. We can, it might be a little bit ambitious to say that I believe that lack of suitable building or site has been the #1 factor since we started doing this report. I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, but it's probably not very far off. And I think this just continues to highlight, at least for the EDPNC at the state level, to continue to work with the General Assembly on product development initiatives that, quite frankly, may or may not be similar to what has been rolled out, currently with the Mega Site and Select Site program. More efforts in that, initiative at the state level and with our partners at, NCEDA, helping us, get the message across with legislative day and things like that. But also, at the local level, really putting an emphasis on, trying to identify potential new site, shell building opportunities, in your community. I know there's that one site consultant out there, and he probably has it trademarked, but no product, no project. And we continue to hear that. That really is what, having a product really is what keeps you in the game and gets you to to the point where you can then highlight, all the other great attributes of the state and of your community, workforce and logistics, transportation, all those other elements. But you could have all that in spades, but if you initially don't have that product that they're looking for, real estate that they're looking for, none of that other stuff really matters, at least in the beginning. So again, like we've stated, this lack of suitable building and site continues to be the #1 reason for lost projects. So with that, I just wanted to, we also took a stab at kind of just highlighting some key trends that we're seeing. And admittedly, Lena and I did not do a super deep dive in what has come across the EDPNC's desk here in the early part of 2025, but just wanted to kind of highlight some key trends that we're seeing around real estate. Obviously, I don't think it can be overstated that manufacturing remains king, with a heavy focus on assembly and production, operations. The clean energy surge, especially in manufacturing, make up a significant share of growth opportunities, and at least in the foreseeable future, that I don't see that trend. I see that trend continuing. So that clean energy space is still or is going to remain very, very important. I would say industrial real estate demand, the rising need for larger sites with heavy utility infrastructure. The utility stuff is not going away. We're still seeing projects, and you're seeing them too, with crazy high demands. I can remember when I first started, if you got a 10 megawatt project request, that was a big deal. And now that's kind of feels like, oh, only 10 megawatts. So, that I don't think the energy demand, requirement is not going away. But as you saw in one of those slides, the at least what we saw in 2024, the need for really big sites, that I guess what I would consider large, the 500 acres plus, has diminished from previous years. International investment, is very strong. As we highlighted, it did slip a little bit in 2024. I think some of that could be, the reason for that could be just the uncertainty, around the election, the November elections, and a lot of companies feeling like, that's one, obviously we all know uncertainty is, what site selectors and companies are trying to avoid. And I think a lot of, especially with foreign investment, we're just kind of took a step back a little bit in 2024 to see where things were going to flush out in the United States. I will, this is one of the things that we did look at for this first few months of 2025, and we're already seeing a significant uptick in foreign projects. In fact, going back to that FDI slide that listed out all of the countries, at least currently, China now has overtaken Canada. And I find that very interesting, again, especially with the latest tariff stuff that's coming down the pike out of DC, and just, the political aspects between the US and China currently. But at least in this first part of 2025, we're starting to see more, a lot of activity out of China. Just a little anecdote there, because I know some of you are probably aware of this. I mean, I think that, it can be a bit, it can be a little bit, or more difficult, to work with a Chinese company. But I feel like, at least from my vantage point, the things that have been put in place by the Department of Commerce and EDPNC to vet Chinese projects out as much as possible, and do as much due diligence as we can, and work with. I know there are some communities that leadership is just, if it's a Chinese project, they're just not interested in considering it, and others are more open to it. So, but this is more, I guess, a plug on our side, is just, whether it's the recruiters, our research team, even in Nathaniel's case as being the main business developer that works the China area, the Asian area, they're all working very hard to make sure that these projects are vetted out and would be ones that we would be proud to have in North Carolina. Just a couple more things, and then I'll wrap up so we can do some questions. Like I said, high utility need, especially around power, is that trend is here, and it's going to continue. And then I would say what we did notice, and again, I don't think that the rail access or the port site or slides really showed this, but while those numbers at first blush are low, we are seeing, compared to previous years, we are seeing rail access required or preferred, and even port access. We've seen slight upticks in those percentages. So while overall they're not huge, but compare that to previous years, there has been some higher requests, or were in 2024 higher requests for both rail and port. So with that is all I have, and happy to hand it back over to Clark, and we can open it up for whatever questions we have.
Thanks so much, Garrett and Lena. I actually look forward to this report every year. Really valuable to track this information. I've got a couple questions of my own, Garrett, but first I also want to thank North Carolina's electric cooperatives for helping us sponsor this report and communicate this out to membership. We are going to jump into Q&A now. We'll start with a few that are in the queue. And remember, please use the Q&A button, not the chat button, to register your questions. I'm going to start with information you may not have on you, Garrett, but do you have an approximate win ratio, like a win to lead ratio for some of this data?
I can tell you in 2024, we had 137 project wins. And that was split. I think 82 of those were business recruitment and the rest were existing industry. And obviously that's also, those weren't all projects that were created in 2024. In fact, probably majority of them were created before that, if not all of them.
Sometimes they follow long and meandering paths.
Yes.
Right, exactly.
I think that's why that's,
wins. Yeah.
Sorry, Lena.
No, go ahead, Garrett.
I think that's because I used to ask that question, Clark, is that it's like, yeah, we get our fair share as a state, or more than our fair share of announcements. And that's great. But sometimes, I always wondered, that same question you had, well, what's the win ratio? And I think it's hard to come up with that, just because a lot of these projects, as we all know, I know that when I was the director and would be working with the project managers and with their own individual metrics, my thought was that any new project that you got or received or opened, at the start, or, September, October, the fourth quarter, that one's, unless it's just an incentives play, those are not going to close, in that calendar year. So if you're needing those to help, get metrics and numbers, you can probably eliminate those from happening in that same calendar year. So,
Well, and the value of this report is always, right, it's a good gut check on what our own product looks like compared to state lead activity, is also a great way to cross-reference state activity with our own target industries and how they line up. To that end, I was curious if you could talk real quick to the trend line around headquarters. I remember in the COVID years, right, we saw that huge drop-off in headquarter movement, a lot of question around commercial office. How does this number stack up historically? And do you see those requests coming back to the EDPNC?
Yeah, I know Lena, I'm not trying to put her on the spot. She may not, but I know she looks at Salesforce all the time. So she may have specific numbers, but thank you for reminding me about that, because that was one of the things that we looked at as part of, how is 2025 shaping up? And we have seen an uptick in headquarters and office projects.
Yeah, I don't have the exact number, but definitely have seen a lot more of those coming into the pipeline. I mean, I think even thinking about site visits and whatnot, like over the past couple weeks, there's been multiple headquarter site visits, and seeing larger headquarter projects as well, come through.
Yeah, it's, you know, I mean, I don't think it's, I don't know if we'll ever, well, I shouldn't say that. I think we're, you know, maybe as more companies do decide to bring people back, you know, and things like that, I think we'll see, you know, those numbers trending higher in subsequent years. Will we ever get back to the numbers that we were seeing pre-COVID? You know, I doubt that.
We'll rely on the crystal ball for that one. Garrett, here's actually just a great question, because energy, and it's about energy manufacturing. It's such a large umbrella. Can you give some color commentary to what those actual products look like when we label an incoming project, like in an energy manufacturing project?
Yeah, and I might need some help with Lena on this because I've kind of been out of that. But yeah, you know, energy and even clean energy, you know, there's so many, you know, like it's a little bit of art and science at the EDPNC, you know, like you know, I use biotech and life science as an example. We always used to have this, you know, like what if you know, what if they're in the bio life sciences sector, but they're not necessarily making a drug or a new product. They're making the pipettes or the, you know, a medical device or, you know, things of that nature. You know, does it go into bio and life sciences like traditionally as people think about it? Or so, yeah, it's a little bit of an art and science to, you know, how things, because I think the one that stood out to me was, I think, food and beverage, you know, under clean energy, like it was only 2%, but it was like a couple of projects that were food and bev was the industry sector, but they did something in the clean energy space, you know, that what they actually produced. So that's why it gets, you know, it gets classified under there. You know, Lena, I don't know if you've got any more, like, I know when you work with Katie on, you know, and the project managers on, you know, setting an opportunity record up, sites that you guys use to kind of differentiate or, you know, make sure a project is falling in the correct category, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like like Garrett was saying, it's difficult to categorize. I feel like some of them, you know, and there would be things like a solar cell manufacturing. I feel like that's a good case of, that's a common one we see that is definitively we put as clean energy. That being said, again, the way we define it, clean energy is a subsector in Salesforce versus an entire industry sector. So keeping in mind that they overlap with other industries as well.
And, you know, in a perfect world, Clark, we would, you know, I mean, we do ask for NAICS codes or an SOC code, something, you know, to help us. I think Lena and I were looking at some of that, or we were looking at some of that data at, you know, when a project first comes in or an RFI, you know, it's rare that you get something like that. And, you know, but, you know, hopefully, you know, by the time if we do get to an incentive discussion and they're filling out a project summary form, you know, then that is required. And that obviously helps us, you know, a lot in, you know, being able to categorize. But it is, you know, in the beginning, it can be a little bit, you know, like I said, it's a little bit tougher to figure out where exactly does this specific company or project fall into those categories.
Here's another trend line question, and I think we've also spotted this rise and fall over time, which is that it felt like from that quick review that there's some larger projects tracked in the pipeline in 2025. Does that feel true that those larger projects seem to be growing in number this year?
Yeah, and again, you know, Lena, you can take over. I don't mean to over talk on you, but yes, we are seeing, you know, I mean, I don't think I'm divulging anything. We've got two, you know, very close to the finish line, really nice, large, like aerospace projects that, you know, hopefully we'll be making decisions here in the next, you know, few weeks, a month or something. So, that and some others, we are seeing again a little bit of an uptick in those larger scoped projects.
Right. Glad to hear it. A bunch of people are also wanting just to confirm where they can find this report. Is it on the website?
It's not on our website. I sent it out, distributed it probably a month ago now, but if you did not get it, me or Garrett can send it to you.
And I think what I'll do, Clark, just for everybody to know, I'll work with our one of the marketing team members who kind of controls our website. I don't know if it's the best place for it, but the product development initiatives, Mega Site and Select Site, have their own landing page on the main EDPNC website. I will speak with her to see if that's an appropriate place, but I mean,
if we don't want to publicize it, then we can work with Liz to get it circulated.
No, I think that is something that I think Liz is going to send some stuff out, but I think it would be good for us to put the, whether it'll go on that landing page or another, now that it's been sent out to everybody and we've had the webinar, I don't see any reason why we couldn't put it up on the website for people to have access. And then the other thing I will say to that, Clark, is that I know that a lot of the daily boots on the ground, our daily practitioners know a lot of this information. But if I can be ever helpful in speaking to, county commissioners meeting or, some kind of board, local board meeting, because what I have found is that a lot of times I hear from people like, oh, like I can tell my board this until I'm blue in the face and they won't listen. But if somebody else comes in, it clicks. So I guess I'm just offering that to anybody, if something like this, or a combination of this with some other product development stuff, could help with board or leadership understanding, I'm happy to participate and do a presentation that for a community.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that offer. I was encouraged as a mid-size metro area to see one of the larger demands for buildings were on this relatively smaller footprint. Yeah. That was surprising to me.
Yeah.
And one of our questioners is asking, are we seeing any trackable trends in terms of the size of markets that these projects are looking for? Which I read as like, who is able to see them? Are they trending towards larger metros? Are they trending towards smaller community, or is it more site dependent?
I don't know just anecdotally, I don't have any specific data on any trends there. I would say, if you go into the EDPNC database, this building and sites database, a lot of those large, if there is anything available out there that's, let's say, 250,000 square feet and above, or maybe even more than that, they tend to be in more rural locations. You're not really going to find a building of that size normally in like a Raleigh or Charlotte, specifically maybe those two, markets. But I think, the other side of that is that if you need a building of that size, most likely you're going to need a pretty substantial workforce. So I think that's where it's like, yeah, you can have that building and maybe make the first or second cut, but that's when those current workforce, any workforce initiatives, that a community might be working on, that's where all of that is going to, because that's going to be the next question is like, well, where are we going to get? Can you help us understand where we're going to get 750 people or 1,000 plus people? Yep. So it kind of goes hand in hand.
It's a great reminder that workforce analysis really needs to accompany any product development that we undertake.
Yeah.
This is more of an interesting report request, so I'll let you take this away and follow up at another time, Garrett. But
okay.
There's a request for, and I know you guys are really transparent about sort of wins over the years. This is looking for a report showing project announcements and tying them back to project names, which is sometimes hard, right? If a local developer is trying to track how a project eventually, what's the disposition of win, lose, or loss across the state. So
Got it.
that might be an interesting one to share across with developers in the coming years if it's not already available.
Okay. Yeah, and I think like when I used to study the Salesforce data a little bit more, much like I know that, hearing from local developers is just like, they call for an update or an email for an update on a project, and we may not hear anything, especially if it's a site consultant. They go just as radio silent on us as our local partners may feel like the BR managers go to, on them. And a lot of times work, like say they're working out an incentive deal with South Carolina and we were a finalist or we were at least in there. A lot of times we don't hear about it until, reading something as well, because that site consultant doesn't want to, they want to keep North Carolina on the hook or whatever state, as long as possible until that announcement is made, because whatever, there's a lot of things there. But yeah, I can, Lena and I and Melissa, we can discuss and see if we can mine that data for folks.
Appreciate that. Listen, we are approaching, or we are at the 3 o'clock hour. So I want to once again thank you, Garrett and Lena, for your time today. NCEDA so appreciates our partnership with the EDP as we continue to provide resources and value and education to our membership across 100 counties of this great state. Before we go, I also want to thank everyone for taking a moment out of their very busy days for being on the call today. Thanks also to our annual sponsors, without whom we could not put on educational benefits like this. And let me quickly highlight two exciting regional lunches that are coming up. NCEDA's Western Lunch is actually tomorrow. So if you are within shouting or driving distance here of Asheville in Western North Carolina, tomorrow, May 9th at noon, Secretary Lilly and others are going to join us for a call for a meeting and a panel discussion on funding resources to continue to drive recovery. And actually, we will still take your registration. If you haven't registered yet, Liz says reach out to her directly. And then upcoming, the Triad Regional Networking Lunch is on May the 20th, so mark your calendars. And of course, the 2025 Summer Conference is coming up in Wilmington. It's always tremendously valuable to see as many of you as possible there. That will be June 11th to 13th. Registration is open for both of these events. Thank you, Garrett, and thank you, everyone, for joining us again today.
Yeah,
Liz?
thank you. Yeah, thanks, Clark. Thank you all. Really appreciate the opportunity.